Hello everyone, and I'm so glad to see you here at Front End Test Fest this year. For me, it's like coming back because I was here, I guess, 2021 or something, and it feels so good to be here, almost like a reunion. But I don't want to be so emotional. Let's get started. Even though my title might be a little clickbaity, I'm sorry for that, but I want to talk why the pyramid is dead, but why it's still living. So, pyramid. You might have heard of the word pyramid in the testing area, in the testing context, but I don't want to spoil you too much. Before I will dive into my topic, let's start real quick with a little introduction of me. My name is Ramona. I'm working as a software engineer at a company called Shopware AG, who is providing an open source e-commerce platform. Due to my background being quite experienced in quality assurance and now being a software engineer, I think I'm quite passionate about testing. So while advocating for testing, I became a GDE in web technologies, a woman Techmaker Ambassador, and a Cypress Ambassador. How you might have guessed when it comes to my t-shirt, but well, I'm known for testing. And this is not that much surprising on the testing conference. But yeah, let me start with testing. But let's do a little detour and start with the following thoughts. Each of us is using hundreds of individual small devices, small apps, sometimes bigger programs, and doing that, the data we handle moves, for example, in my case, from an Apple computer, from a Mac, through a Linux-based cloud infrastructure across the internet. And on this point, we are all customers. We are all users, not only developers or testers, right? We are the users, basically. And in that point, we rely on all those systems I mentioned to just work, which means, in other words, we rely on 1,000 developers to make this work. That they not only did the best they could, but also that their software, their ideas simply work. Sounds quite strange, but it's true. Unfortunately, to come back to us as developers and testers, we have a tool to instill that trust, to care for this trust. It's called testing. So that sounds like a huge responsibility, right? To ensure that the trust of the users is legitimate, it's not in vain. And we want to do the best we could too. But how do we start with that? Well, there's one thing we need to decide beforehand. With testing, what do we want? What do we want to achieve with our tests? And of course, as said, we want to fulfill the user's trust. We want to ensure quality. We want them to have fun and confidence in our applications. And of course, that means fewer bugs. And yeah, from the other side, not taking a look at the end user, but at the developer, we want us to be confident, to trust in our tests too, that they are fast, that they are reliable and meaningful. And this can be referred to as a confidence level. May it be user confidence, but developer confidence. So developers can have confidence in our tests, and all of those, no matter which rules we have, we want to be confident in our software, in our releases of software. Well, there was a quote I stumbled upon when it comes to doing the research of this talk. And I guess it summarized this goal pretty well. So Kenzie Dodds once wrote that the biggest challenge is knowing what to test and how to test it in a way that gives true confidence rather than the false confidence of testing implementation details. So how can we manage to have this? Well, we need to mind our testing types and our tests themselves. There are thousands of memes along the real world on the internet showing bad decisions. For example, what happens when you don't pay attention to the right ratio of tests? Well, look at these drawers. You can use them the way you want to, but you cannot use them together. So the unit tests, the tests of the drawer will pass, but the integration tests, like the combination of the drawers, will not work out. So, well, units should always work fine by themselves, but still work when they are used together like this. So we want to come there to avoid all those problems of tests without valid results, tests we can not trust. So to achieve the goal I mentioned, there are many approaches. And often they are described in terms of different shapes. I guess people like to draw shapes. I don't want to exclude myself on it because obviously I drew shapes, but yeah, they are really often used for metaphors of showcasing the right test ratio. So what should you test and how much should you test? So let me show you some of the ones I have seen myself and how they played out. And remember, I started to talk about pyramids because I think this is the typical one which will come into your head when it comes to thinking about test strategies, on ideas on how testing types should be used, how they interact best, and yeah, basically how many tests from which type I should, right? So spoiler alert, the test pyramid is there. And yeah, it gives this talk its title. It's well known for many people. It's one of the several metaphors now that groups software tests into areas of varying granularity. But what's the pyramid really? Well, Michael came up with this concept in his book Succeeding with Agile, and it was further developed as a practical test pyramid by Martin Fowler. And it, as said, as many shapes, it puts tests in an order that depends on performance and costs. So the main message, according to Fowler, is write tests with different granularity, and the more high level you get, the fewer tests you should have. So, for example, if you take a look at unit tests, it's the base and the first layer of the pyramid. You should write more from those because the test order indicates we will go from fast and cheap, which unit tests are, to slow and expensive, which the other types are. Because here, if a test is clear, fast to run, and actually really reliable, you will not spend that much money to maintain it and to, for example, execute them. So at the base, it's those fast unit tests. In the middle, it's some service or integration tests because they are still pretty quick to be executed and still cover the combination of units. And at the top, these are the less tests, so please don't write too many of those, but these are specific UI tests, for example, end-to-end or visual tests. And it's natural that they are a bit more costly because they are slower to run, because the computer clicking your application like a user just takes more time than just to validate the in and output like you do in a unit test, right? Not mention the complete application stack being present. So as said, the confidence is higher with the tests at the top, but the costs are higher too. So it gives you a little hint on how to prioritize. So this sounds pretty easy, right? And easy to apply. Well, writing many unit tests and less E2E tests and integration somewhere in between. But in the last years, an interesting discussion about this approach developed internally at our company I'm working on, as well as externally if you monitor Twitter or if you take a look at conferences and the hallway talks there. So, well, and I can confirm the pyramid does not necessarily cover our structure too well because it has a couple of reasons why it's slowly dying. Okay, that sounds a little bit harsh, but why it might fell out of time. Well, sometimes it feels like the testing pyramid is oversimplified and leads us in the wrong direction, away from the user, away to the confidence level. As said, we want to fulfill the trust. We want to make the user feel confident in our releases, right? So it will shift us away from our focus. And if we really want to know if our product can be used by the user as intended, we need to look at the whole when testing. But still, the higher you go up the pyramid, the higher the confidence level of the individual test will be. So it will be costly, but you get also more for your money. So what you do now? And another flaw I discovered when it comes to the testing pyramid is the big priority of unit tests. So are there maybe even overemphasized? Many people find problems, especially when it comes to this. And we can start with, okay, what is a unit test for you? And if you ask 4 or 5 people what exactly those unit tests are, you will sometimes get 4 or 5 different answers. The way we defined it, like being a test of a small unit. But what is a unit? Is it a class? Is it a function? Is it maybe a complete component? Where does the unit test stop? And another problem with unit tests is that they erode. Because coverage is relative. So if it's now 100% or sufficient, will it still be it if you develop new feature or word new test? You have to do extra work of keeping them up to date. So there's a maintenance overhead. So in real life, at least in my case, sometimes they ended up in skip tests, and we don't want that. So in this regard, the pyramid became more like a test diamond. So the erosion is displayed in this little testing strategy, but we shifted a little bit more to integration. For example, the aforementioned unit test with context, like a component test. And maybe we wrote some unit tests which are a little bit too big for unit tests. So yeah, as I saw with myself, basically integration tests were called the forgotten layer of pyramid. So the most important focus from this test diamond and some other forms is you shouldn't neglect this layer, because there's a good cost-benefit ratio to find. And yeah, remember the meme, unit test is incomplete on its own. So maybe this adaptation of a diamond is more accurate for real-life situations. But still, when it comes to this one, could it be that something's missing in the diamond or in the pyramid or whatever? We only read about test automation. What about manual testing, which we always will need? And this is good because automated testing is meant to take routine tasks away from the tester so they can focus on the more important tasks, not replace. So how does that play out? Here, for example, if you visualize manual testing as well, it look like here, or if you didn't took attention on how to start testing. It's a testing ice cone, and I'm still not completely safe if it's a good pattern to use, because as said, manual testing and IntuiTesting testing is still really costly. So can we tweak this a little bit? Maybe we could go in this direction of a testing trap, which was, I guess it was introduced by Gleb Matov. So people dealing with Cypress will probably know him. And visual testing is added, which was completely missing before. And yeah, it will cover the unit test issue by making it a bit more component unit and API sided, but still, as I hinted a little bit, it's still a little bit time consuming. And I was talking about component testing a lot. Where do we find it? In the pyramid, in the diamond cone, or in the crab? Where does it fit? Especially with the example of Cypress component testing, giving the test runner perks to the testing of components, basically. Some say it's unit testing, some say it's integration testing. Too much of unit testing, controversial here. So, but still, I want to say that integration testing is still really important. So, especially when it comes to thinking of it compromised. So let's take apart this quote. We should write tests. I don't think on a testing conference we should argue about that. Not only because it builds trust, but also because it saves time and maintenance. We shouldn't write too many tests because 100% coverage is not always good, because then you test unprioritized and have a lot of maintenance effort. And if you write tests just for the sake of coverage, they are basically not always giving you meaning, right? So not too many, and mostly integration, which is basically the most important point in this quote. Here, the emphasis on integration tests come back. They have the most business value and the most confidence level for you. So, well, is there an adaptation of the testing pyramid which helps us a little bit? Yeah, I found after some research the testing trophy, which was, I guess, developed by Kenzie Dodds. And I like it a lot because it brings back a good cost-benefit ratio and yet a high confidence level at the same time. So we don't need to play the one side against the other. It's a wonderful balance. And yeah, as said, if we really want to know if our product can be used by the user as intended, we need to look at it as a whole. So yeah, we will continue to pay strong attention to integration testing. It's the biggest layer here. And another layer came into here. It's the static analysis layer, which I really like. It's not completely testing, of course, because it's like a spell checker, but it can find codes that issue and in this regard could bring first avoidable bugs to you. So I like it's included. Of course, unit testing is still important and UI testing is still present as the last layer. You should still prioritize. But as said, E2E is little but effective. So best cost and benefit ratio. Well, but still, there's one question I want to bring back here. It's the one of where's manual testing here? And I would say it doesn't exclude it, right? So for example, in my daily doing, the manual testing surrounds automation. So as said, it's a complement to the human testers so that they can spend their knowledge, their creativity, their ideas and not need to stick to checklist testing just to verify stuff which can be automated, right? So yeah, in the UI layer to even more complement the people, I would include visual tests to further facilitate the testers here. Well, okay, much information again, much shapes. So yes, to have a little conclusion, the test pyramid has some flaws, especially the definition problem of a unit test applies to us. And for example, in my case, from our team, it made us to switch. That is to say, to do a big refactoring, to actually have a testing strategy to fit more to our purpose, especially as far as integration tests are concerned. And the point of a confidence level for the user is really important to me, that the user trusts in our application, that the user can use the application the way they intend to not lose touch to this goal. But still, a plot twist. It's still not completely wrong because otherwise the adaptation would screw the pyramid, for example, the order of the tests layers completely. So you can derive a lot of useful things from it regarding prioritization of tests. And in the end, the alternatives are further developments of the pyramid, which takes off many points again, like the base layer being unit tests, just the middle one being integration tests, but still a little bit more focus on that one, and less but important E2E tests, covering, for example, your happy path or areas which are really vulnerable and could cost you bigger problems if there's a failure. And one could now say, I can't talk, but listen to me. This sheet sums it up really well, and I'm sorry for the wall of text, but I thought it would be so perfect. Rarely do teams stick to all those patterns, no matter which one we use, textbook-like, and we couldn't either. Tests like ours are sometimes difficult to divide and define apart, and even Martin Fowler emphasized the difference in definitions in his articles and considered it positive. For example, your unit test definition often differs depending on who you ask. And this is not a bad thing if the most important thing in testing is not lost sight of. Remember, your tests should run quickly and yet reliably. They should give you a result and only fail if something really breaks. And the most important point, which if there's one thing to remember from my talk, it's this: your test should be designed to benefit the user, not just to provide 100% coverage. And if you design your test like this, the most important is already done. So if you still remember something from my talk, it's this: don't get too confused by all these forms. It's really valuable to know the pyramid and other testing strategies, but don't get caught up in them. You can and you should take many learnings from it, but every project is different. So, for example, the project I'm working in at Shopware, we also had the deviate. And if you discuss so much about forms and shapes and percentages of tests, it's easy to forget the most important things we mentioned to create trust in our tests. So, yeah, I know this is everyone's favorite phrase, but it depends. Choosing the right strategy depends on your project and its requirements. And in my case, it was, for example, the test trophy, which was perfect, but it might be something else for you. So please, after this talk, you find me on Twitter, you can find me here at the conference in the Q&A on LinkedIn. Please say how you think about it and which of those shapes will be best for you. Or even if there are any, for example, the test honeycomb by Spotify, which I might take a look myself onto, for example, too. So I hope I could show you nevertheless different approaches and give you a good gut feeling for your project. And what's left to say then, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to be with you. Cheers!